Hello everybody and welcome back to Rebellious Menstruation. This is a book review of Miranda Burton's art book Underground, or graphic novel should I say, and the subheading is Marsupial Outlaws and Other Rebels of Australia's War in Vietnam. Miranda Burton was born in Auckland in New Zealand in 1973. She became a printmaker at the age of 10, a dedicated marimba player in her teens, and a Super 8 stop-motion filmmaker at 21. She graduated from the North Adelaide School of Art in South Australia in 1995 with an advanced diploma, and in 2004 finished a Bachelor of Multimedia Design at Swinburne University in Melbourne. She worked for many years in commercial and independent animation and as a visual artist, basically being the catalyst for her starting graphic novels, and in 2011 her first book, Hidden, was published by Black Pepper Publishing. Hidden was also released in France, in French, under the title Caches by La Petite Beules? Can't pronounce French, sorry. Well, not all French. I can pronounce the words that English stole from French. In 2011, Miranda became an artist-in-residence for 2 years at Dunmouchen in Australian artist Clifton Pugh's former studio. During this residency, she also learned of the Pugh's wombat, who was registered for military service in Vietnam in 1972, resulting in her doing, research that's kind of led her down, ironically enough, a wombat hole, and that then led to this graphic novel, Underground, Marsupial Outlaws and Other Rebels of Australian War in Vietnam. This book was completed in a little shack in bushland northeast of Melbourne, shared with a number of wombat tenants under the floorboards. In her spare time, Miranda reads, finds new spaces to grow plants, and tries to occasionally practice her marimba. So, Underground is led by kind of at least the premise of the back of this book is this wombat is essentially the jumping off point. So the back of it has, why would a wombat be registered for war? It's 1965, and an old Tattersall's barrel, which is like a gambling barrel, starts rolling out marbles to randomly, like a bingo, rolling marbles to randomly conscripted young Australian men to fight in the war in Vietnam. Melbourne housewife Jean McLean is outraged, as are her friends Cliff and Marlene Pugh, who live in the country with their wombat Hooper. Determined to wreck the system, Jean forms the Save Our Sons movement, the Save Our Sons movement's Victorian branch, and she and her supporters take to the streets to protest. Meanwhile, in the small country town of Katunga, Bill Cantwell joins the Australian Army, and in Saigon, young May Ho is writing letters to South Vietnamese soldiers for her school, from her school desk, or allied South Vietnamese soldiers. And when Hooper's call-up papers arrive, he mysteriously goes underground. So, Jean McLean is the main story in this book, and her, and she's really the focus of this story, and even her friends at Cliff, and Marlene, who are obviously mentioned, and whose artist-in-residence place that she stayed at, do appear in it, but they really appear as interactions with Jean. Minor supporting stories are that of Bill Cantwell, who joins the Australian Army, and that of Mai Ho, who while, you know, is writing letters to allied South Vietnamese soldiers, she eventually becomes a refugee in Australia with her 2 small children, and she spends the next 40 years separated from her husband and her kids from their father, while she's a refugee in Australia, and she builds their life here. So these stories do intersect in interesting and unexpected ways, and destinies intertwine as a new world gradually emerges into where we are today. So it is inspired, obviously, by true events, but Jean McLean really is the focus of this story. Jean McLean is a former Australian politician. She was born in London to an industrial scientist, Arthur Marsden Crossland, and a high school principal, Pauline Berezovsky. She was homeschooled except for brief periods at public school. She moved to Australia, where she joined the Labor Party in 1965. And she became a union director of the Prahran College of Advanced Education from 1974 to 1980. From 1981 to 1985, she was the ACTU arts officer and was a federal conference delegate from 1976 to 1988. In 1985, she was elected to the Victorian Legislative Council, representing Boronia Province. When that seat was abolished in 1992, she moved to Melbourne West Province, which she represented until her retirement in 1999. She has had a obviously prominent and obviously controversial career as a politician and as an activist who supports a broad range of high-profile public causes. Of course, the Vietnamese War was very controversial, and the conscription was very controversial, and the returning Vietnamese veterans were very controversial as well. This is Bill and his brother. Bill lost an eye in Vietnam. Jean came to public notice as the convener of the Save Our Sons movement, which from 1965 to 1973 campaigned against conscription and Australia's involvement in the Vietnam War as an ally. She was also vice chair of the Vietnam moratorium movement. In 1975, she became particularly infamous as one of the Fairly Five, which is actually covered off in here. This is where we meet my Ho, and back to Jean and Marlene and the Wombat. So she got arrested and spent 14 days in Fairley Women's Prison after being charged with trespass when they entered a building to hand out leaflets, therefore becoming part of the Fairly Five group. In 1985, Jean was elected to the Legislative Council as an Australian Labor Party member for Boronia Province. So, in amongst all of this controversial career, she also worked tirelessly to be heard. So she also actually visited Vietnam during this time, and she actually travelled on her British passport because it was illegal for Australians to travel to North Vietnam, but she went anyway. So that caused another controversy because she obviously, I think Americans may be able to relate to this type of thing, because I believe Jane Fonda was photographed in Vietnam around this time and became known as Hanoi Jane, I believe. So, as a parliamentarian, Jean was particularly active on the Drugs and Crime Prevention Committee and the Law Reform Committee, which was responsible for reforming the jury system and developing witness protection. She also immersed herself in a wide range of international causes. Obviously, Vietnam was one of them, but also Namibia, West Papua, and most notably East Timor. Her involvement with East Timor had been extensive. She gave tireless support to the East Timorese resistance in their long struggle to achieve independence. She visited East Timor when it was under Indonesian occupation, much like she visited North Vietnam while it was under occupation as well. And subsequently leading up to and following the independence in East Timor. Her interventions have seen Victoria University become involved in the struggle for independence and for East Timor, and she has acted as a champion for the university's continued role in the development of Timor and its people. As a counsellor of Victoria University for 9 years, she has been a significant contributor to the development and the advancement of the university. So, in recognition of her outstanding work as an activist and extensive political career as a member of the Victorian Parliament and her significant contributions to Victoria University, she was given an honorary degree, doctorate degree from the university to become the Honourable Jean McLean. In 2016, she also received the Order of Timor-Leste from President, I wish I could pronounce names better, Tor Matan Ruak. She has 2 children and 2 grandchildren and continues to work as an activist. So this book really focuses on her activism and the story of Bill Cantrell, who fought in Vietnam and lost an eye, and the story of Ho Min, who obviously grew up, got married, had kids, and then came to Australia via boat, are kind of bookended or woven in amongst this story as kind of both a story of a refugee who suffered the consequences of war in her country, and as a serving military who obviously also suffered the consequences, the physical consequences and emotional consequences of attending a war. And these are the type of protests that happen. So this is from the 8th of May 1970, and it mentions Sydney, 25,000 people, 8,000 in Brisbane. Brisbane's the capital of Queensland. Sydney is the capital of New South Wales. 6,000 in Adelaide, the capital of South Australia, 3,000 in Perth, the capital of Western Australia, and 3,000 in Hobart, the capital of Tasmania, which is the island beneath Melbourne. So this is the type of... So this is the 5 go to Fairleigh. This is when she became known as part of the Fairleigh 5. So it really does kind of weave the minor stories of Bill Cantrell and Min Ho throughout the activism of Jean McLean. And of course the hook in this story, as we can tell from the wombat, is that part of their activism was registering the wombat and then obviously putting him into the ballot to go to war. So this is kind of, and then the book kind of rounds out what happened to Mai and kind of the consequences of the war for each of them. Mai Ho ends up, this is, it kind of follows her. She comes to Australia with her 2 kids. They obviously suffer racism, well, not obviously, but at that time, well, they're still racist now. The racism is just directed at, well, the Chinese, but this is, I'll let you guess why. So she ends up becoming an activist in herself, and she ends up actually meeting Jean McLean, and her daughter becomes mayor of Marylebone, becomes mayor of a district in Melbourne, and her son, I believe, becomes a lawyer. So yeah, so it's actually kind of rounds out what happens. So this is the characters here. Mai Ho, who was born in Saigon, Vietnam in 1959, After the reunification of the country in 1975, she had planned to escape by boat, which she did, and upon arriving in Australia as a refugee in December 1982 with her brother, sister, mother and 2 daughters. After working at the Holden factory for a number of years, which was in Melbourne, she established a welfare agency in 1992 known as the Footscray Community Support Service, later renamed the Australian Vietnamese Services Resources Centre. In 1993 she was elected to Footscray Council, and in 1997 became the first Vietnamese woman to stand as mayor in Australia for the newly amalgamated city of Maribyrnong. In 2001, in her hometown of Melbourne, May is studying. In 2021, in her hometown of Melbourne, Mai is studying to complete a degree in law and a master's in translation. Bill Cantwell was born in Melbourne in 1948, grew up in Katanga, northeast Victoria. In 1965, he enlisted in the army, and in 1968 was sent to Vietnam in Australia's 1st Battalion. After surviving the Battle of Corral, he was sent back to Australia some months later when, under enemy attack, he became permanently injured. I think he was taken out by Americans so in 1970 he was discharged after finishing high school at Taylor's College in Melbourne. Bill went on to study law at RMIT and began practicing law in 1976. His career as a barrister and solicitor lasted 30 years, and he specialised in litigation while volunteering for Legal Aid Victoria. And of course, Hooper Algernon Pugh was a Commonwealth vet who lived in Dumbarton for approximately 3 years while he was known as Hooper. According to Clifton Pugh's admission to the age he was registered for military services under the name Hooper Algernon Pugh, circumstantial evidence would suggest that his marble was drawn from the ballot in March 1972, after which he disappeared around the time a letter arrived requesting he present for a medical exam. So that is the Underground book, or graphic novel. Check it out. It was released this year in 2021. It was an interesting read, and it's an easy to read format as well. Anyway, this video is getting now outrageously out of control, so thank you for watching. Enjoy your morning, afternoon, evening, depending of course where you are in the day, and I will catch up with you in the next video. Bye everyone.